A Ukrainian unit just achieved the impossible against Russia. Scratch that. 3 Ukrainian units just did the impossible, and Putin's latest push against his enemy lies in tatters. Russian President Vladimir Putin believed that he was getting it all his own way in Ukraine. His troops managed to gain more than 1,600 square miles of Ukrainian territory in 2024 and have been pushing in the Donbas region throughout 2025. But Ukraine isn't lying down. Russia's invasion is faltering at a critical juncture, and Putin now has to deal with forces that are taking back territory, destroying his armoured columns and killing his troops. Ukraine just managed an amazing triple-tap victory, and it all started in the Luhansk region. Located in the Donbas region upon which Putin focused much of Russia's 2024 campaign, Luhansk is a key territory for Putin. It's part of Ukraine's industrial heart, and Putin wants it because it gives him access to vital infrastructure, along with some of Ukraine's massive mineral resources. That's why he's pushing so hard in the Donbas. Putin sees money in the region. But he just lost a vital piece of territory in Luhansk, and for the first time in 3 years, a Ukrainian unit has managed to strike back. That's according to Militani, which says that soldiers from Ukraine's 3rd Assault Brigade have announced the liberation of the small village of Nadia from Russian forces. A report published on March 23 by the brigade's Telegram channel states, "The capture of the village of Nadia cost the enemy 2 months of effort, and 2 mechanized regiments, 752nd and 254th of the 20th Russian Army, were completely wiped out." This is massive for Ukraine. Nadia had been subjected to constant Russian assault since the end of February 2025 and had been a target for Putin's forces long before then. Eventually, Russia managed to capture the village, though, as Militani points out, it wasn't able to push on from there to take any surrounding territory. The reason is simple. Ukraine was focused on taking it back in what the UK's The Telegraph outlet calls a rare success in an area almost fully held by Russia since the 2022 invasion. In other words, this victory isn't an example of Ukraine defending a position against Russia. It shows us that Ukraine is going on the attack. It's taking back territory Putin thought his troops held. According to The Telegraph, Ukraine won the village back as part of a 30-hour operation that eventually led it to taking back a square mile of territory from Putin's clutches. Militani's report goes into more detail, saying that the beginning of the operation saw Ukraine pelt Nadia with intense artillery assaults, which included the involvement of several multiple launch rocket systems, or MLRS. It doesn't specify the exact types of MLRS Ukraine used, but powerful artillery systems like these are capable of firing several rockets simultaneously, often in the region of 6 to 12, to pepper an opponent's position with explosive firepower. The HIMARS launchers Ukraine has received from the US and its allies are a good example and may have been used by Ukraine's 3rd Assault Brigade to do the bulk of the damage. With Russian troops already scattered by the MLRS fire, Ukraine followed up by conducting a ground assault. This attack included several BMP-2s, which are tracked and armoured infantry fighting vehicles built by Russia. They entered service in the Russian armed forces in 1980, making them Soviet-era vehicles. And Ukraine likely has them because much of its military relied on these older pieces of equipment before Putin's invasion and the influx of Western weaponry that resulted. Each BMP-2 is equipped with a stabilized 30mm cannon, along with a 7.62mm PKT coaxial machine gun that is mounted to the left of the vehicle's main armament. Add a trio of smoke grenade dischargers into the mix, and you get a fighting vehicle that can cause severe damage while also covering its tracks so opposing troops struggle to fire back. Think of the BMP-2 as a mini tank capable of transporting up to 7 soldiers while laying down fire on an enemy position. That appears to be precisely how Ukraine used it to attack Nadia. Though the BMP-2 wasn't alone. Ukraine also used several tanks and Western-provided armoured vehicles in the assault, including the M113 and the M577. The M113 is crewed by 2 people and has a combat weight of 12.3 tons. It's also capable of carrying up to 11 passengers and is protected by fully enclosed armour made using 5083 aircraft-quality aluminum alloy. It's also a hard-hitting vehicle. The M113 is usually fitted with a .50 caliber M2 Browning machine gun as its main armament. However, it can also be equipped with anti-tank weapons, a 40mm Mk19 automatic grenade launcher, and high-explosive cannon rounds. More complex versions can even be mounted with the M47 Dragon missile system, though it seems unlikely Ukraine has access to that. As for the M577, Army Guide describes it as being essentially an M113, only with a higher roof behind the driver's position. It's a command post vehicle, meaning it's equipped with additional radio sets that could have allowed Ukraine's 3rd Assault Brigade to coordinate the assaults it carried out with the rest of its tanks and armoured vehicles. That's not all. Most of Ukraine's armoured vehicles seem to be equipped with large electronic warfare antennas. These antennas were likely used to provide protection against incoming Russian drones, ensuring that Ukraine's 3rd Assault Brigade could conduct its counter-invasion of Nadia without worrying about explosive Russian drones attacking its vehicles from above. With all of this weaponry, we get a good idea of how Ukraine just liberated Nadia. It assaulted the village with the MLRS fire, possibly the HIMARS rocket system that destroyed Russian fortifications and potentially damaged some of the vehicles Putin's forces might have used to repel the assault. With that massive damage done and a gap in Nadia's defences created, Ukraine's 3rd Assault Brigade rolled in on tanks, BMP-2s and its Western-provided infantry fighting vehicles. The M577 likely stayed back to coordinate radio chatter between these vehicles as the rest pushed on, using machine guns and perhaps even grenade launchers to push Russia's entrenched soldiers out of Nadia. The result? Putin just lost a village he spent 2 months trying to win. Given that Russia was losing around 1,170 soldiers and 19 tanks per day as of February 26, the odds are that Russia expended several thousands of soldiers and vehicles to capture Nadia in the first place. But now, that's all gone. The village is liberated, and perhaps more importantly for Ukraine, Nadia can now serve as a staging area for further assaults against Russia-occupied territory in the Donbas. Putin now has to deal with the fact that he's lost a key piece of territory to a Ukrainian unit that combined powerful offensive force with intelligence electronic warfare defenses to neutralize his soldiers. And if that was all that Ukraine managed to achieve over the past couple of days, perhaps it wouldn't be such a big deal for Putin. Sure, losing Nadia would sting, but Russia's leader could lick his wounds safe in the knowledge that his forces were likely gaining ground elsewhere. Only, that's not what happened. Nadia was just the first in a triple-tap offensive by Ukrainian units that have devastated Russian troops. As Ukraine's 3rd Assault Brigade was retaking Nadia, Ukraine's Air Force was decimating a Russian troop position in Toretsk. Also located in the Donbas, Toretsk is home to 30,000 people and is classified as a key strategic city. Russia claimed that it had managed to capture the entire city back in February 2025, though Ukraine denied those reports. Like so many cities in the Donbas, Toretsk is important to Putin because of its industrial capabilities. It's a coal mining city that is home to 2 mines, both of which were closed down as Putin's forces approached. The General Staff of Ukraine said in February that Russia launched 10 attacks against the city in a matter of days. According to Reuters, it added, the occupiers' main efforts and attacks were concentrated near the city of Toretsk. Ukrainian servicemen repelled all enemy attacks. This was followed up by a spokesperson for the Ukrainian forces stationed in the city, who said, the defense forces of Ukraine are resisting the overwhelmingly superior numbers of the Russian aggressor, inflicting devastating losses in personnel and equipment. Taking Toretsk would be huge for Putin. Beyond the city's coal mining facilities, Toretsk could also act as a regional hub positioned on high ground, which would allow Russia's forces to advance into Ukraine's northwest while compromising regional logistics. Ukraine couldn't allow that to happen, which brings us to the second of its triple-tap attacks. According to Ukraine's Armed Forces General Staff, a precise Air Force strike conducted on March 21 has completely destroyed the positions held by the Russian 1st Separate Guards Motorized Rifle Brigade, along with the position held by the 103rd Motorized Rifle Regiment. Both Russian units were hiding in a shelter built into Toretsk. The 1st Separate Guards Motorized Rifle Brigade was previously part of the Donetsk People's Republic, or DPR, which is a separatist movement inside the Donetsk that wants to return the territory to Russian rule. It was absorbed into the Russian military in January 2023, and it's played a key role in Putin's Donbas campaign throughout the war. At the beginning of Putin's invasion, the brigade held a contact line extending from Shirokine to Pokrovsk. It later played a part in the captures of Op-10 and Avdiivka before going on the rampage in southern Donetsk. In the summer of 2024, the brigade also helped Putin capture the Ukrainian village of Prorez. As for the 103rd Motorized Rifle Regiment, fairly little is known about this unit. It's likely a support unit meant to prop up the 1st Separate Guards Motorized Rifle Brigade's numbers, though that isn't certain. Ukraine's Armed Forces General Staff provided more details about the attack, saying on Telegram that airborne assault groups were also among the Russian casualties, as were a team of drone operators. Exact numbers are still being clarified, the General Staff wrote in a post, but the destruction of their shelter and personnel greatly diminishes the ability of the Russian military to operate effectively in the Toretsk axis. Footage published by Euromaidan Press shows just how Ukraine pulled this strike off, using a targeted airstrike that decimated the Dzержinska enrichment facility the Russian units were using as shelter. That facility was located in Toretsk central mine, but now it lies in ruin. That's vital for Ukraine. As the Kiev Independent reports, Toretsk lies just 12.4 miles away from Bakhmut, which has also seen intense fighting between Russian and Ukrainian troops throughout Putin's invasion. The capture of Toretsk would have allowed Putin to use the city as a staging area for future assaults against other partially occupied positions. Taking out the enrichment facility is also a win, though it's one that hurts Ukraine as well, as it can no longer use that facility in its mining operations. However, it's also ensured that Russia can't use that facility if it takes control of Toretsk. An enrichment facility can always be rebuilt. Reclaiming such a vital city would be much more difficult. Like Nadia, Toretsk has become a location where Ukraine has launched a successful counterattack. Russia's shelter in the city is destroyed, months of hard work by Putin's troops now up in smoke. And Russia can't even take advantage of the mining facilities Putin wanted to get his hands on when he began assaulting Toretsk in the first place. He's also lost a key unit in the Donbas, which makes any future attempts to take territory even harder. Which brings us to the third strike in the triple tap. How does Putin usually take territory? In his ideal world, he'll bombard the territory with missiles and glide bombs, weakening Ukraine's defenses. Once he's created gaps in Ukraine's positions, he'll send in the ground troops. The infantry is accompanied by armoured units, with the latter using tanks and armoured vehicles to cause enough damage for the infantry to take a Ukrainian position. It's an attritional strategy that leads to the massive Russian losses we touched on earlier. However, it's a strategy that's been slowly working for Putin throughout much of the Ukraine war. There's just one problem. Putin's strategy relies heavily on armoured columns, both to assault Ukraine's defensive positions and to protect Russians' human waves. And on March 23, a Ukrainian unit decimated one of Putin's armoured columns. Militani again provides the details. It says that Ukraine's 117th Separate Mechanized Brigade stopped a Russian armoured column in its tracks in the Pokrovsk region, according to a post published on the brigade's Facebook and Telegram pages. Reuters reports that Pokrovsk is yet another strategically important city, which Putin is targeting because it serves as a road and rail hub through which Ukraine can transport supplies and troops to other areas of the Donbas. It also lies on a key road used by the Ukrainian military to supply other embattled Ukrainian-held outposts, according to Reuters. Like Toretsk, Pokrovsk is also home to a coal mine, the largest producer of coking coal in Ukraine in fact, along with a steel industry that was vital to Ukraine's pre-war economy. Russian media has dubbed it the gateway to Donetsk, because taking control of Pokrovsk means Russia causes severe problems for Ukraine's supply lines in the Donbas. Losing the road that runs through the city will also make it harder for Ukraine to defend nearby pockets of territory such as Toretsk and Nadia. Plus, it's always a good thing for Putin when he's able to take control of a city that offers up coal and steel. After all, gaining control of natural resources is one of his main goals with the Ukraine invasion. But he's not getting his hands on Pokrovsk anytime soon, thanks to Ukraine's 117th Separate Mechanized Brigade. Formed in February 2023, a year after Putin invaded Ukraine, the 117th Separate Mechanized Brigade is an offshoot of Ukraine's 15th Separate Rifle Battalion. It took part in Ukraine's failed counter-offensive against Putin forces in 2023 before being tasked with defending the Pokrovsk region. The brigade includes 3 mechanized battalions, a tank battalion, an artillery group, and anti-tank forces, along with engineering, signals, and logistic battalions. However, it was the brigade's drone operators that took center stage on March 23. The fighting began when Russian forces deployed armored personnel carriers, or APCs, to Pokrovsk. These APCs were equipped with anti-drone screens, which Russia believed would protect them from assaults by Ukraine's hordes of unmanned aerial vehicles. And for a brief time, they may have been right. However, that didn't stop the 117th from using drones. Rather than attack the armoured column immediately, the brigade used its drones for reconnaissance and tracking. The brigade bided its time, waiting for the column to reach the appropriate position. Then, they launched an attack. The reconnaissance drones pulled back. though still kept eyes on the column as Ukrainian strike first-person view or FPV drones flew in. Those drones attacked the APCs, piercing their armor and demonstrating that Russia's anti-drone defenses were practically useless. Footage shot by a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone and published on YouTube shows just how devastating the attack was. The video doesn't reveal much at first. We see a field with what appears to be a light snow covering alongside lines of trees. But as the footage continues, a Russian APC comes into view. The perspective is switched, and we see a trio of vehicles all thundering along a road that's slightly hidden by a tree line. The perspective switches again for a few more seconds until we see it, the explosion. A Ukrainian FPV drone hits its target and the lead APC goes up in flames. As it grinds to a halt, the APCs following the lead vehicle slow down. That was a mistake. More explosions follow, with each APC getting hit by FPV drones. Eventually, all are stopped in their tracks, left as little more than smouldering wreckages on a Ukrainian road. The brigade reports that the APCs were eventually destroyed and burned in the field near Pokrovsk, ensuring Russian forces had no chance of reclaiming them. It's another major blow to Putin's Pokrovsk campaign, and that campaign was already faltering. As Viktor Trehubov, who's the spokesperson for the Kortisia Operational Strategic Group, reveals, Russia's losses have been so severe that restoring combat capability will be difficult, at least in the near term, he says. Still, Pokrovsk remains a key objective for them. If they intend to achieve their stated goals, they'll have to continue pushing forward. And continuing their push is precisely what Russia will do, only now it's forced to push without valuable APCs. With these three strikes all conducted within hours of one another, Ukraine's triple tap just relieved a whole lot of pressure. By retaking Nadia, Ukraine has secured a village that Putin intended to use to launch more assaults in the Donbas. Wasting Russia's time and resources is a secondary, though still important outcome of that village assault. The airborne strike in Toretsk achieved a similar goal by taking out a key Russian shelter in a city that Putin covets. Plus, Ukraine goes one step closer to reclaiming a key industrial and logistical hub. And the Pokrovsk armoured column attack also keeps a Ukrainian logistical hub alive and well, in addition to taking out important Russian equipment Putin relied on to exert even more pressure on Ukraine in the Donbas. Going forward, Ukraine now has the advantages Putin hoped to gain from these territories. It can use Nadia to stage its own assaults on occupied territory. The same will likely be true for Toretsk, especially with Russia's position weakened to the point that Ukraine has the chance to counterattack and reclaim the city. Add all of that to a successful defense of Pokrovsk, and Putin's push into the Donbas gets stopped in its tracks. So much for all that momentum Putin believed he had. But what do you think about this trio of terrific Ukrainian strikes? Three separate units have all just achieved the impossible by devastating Putin's push in the Donbas. Do you think more Ukrainian strikes are coming? How will Putin react to these massive losses? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the Military Show for more news about Ukraine's innovative defense against Putin's invading forces.